15 years ago, two famous movie producers departed from their original studio and launched a new company to release their films. However, that would also mark the beginning of the end for them that would culminate in one of the biggest scandals to hit Hollywood. I'm referring to the Weinstein Company. Nowadays, it's a disgraced name for deserving reasons. Yet the writing was on the wall even before that. The studio was founded in 2005 after Harvey and Bob Weinstein left Miramax over disagreements with Disney over budget, the films they were allowed to release, and other issues. Even though they left behind the many films they produced since 1979, the Weinsteins were allowed to take with them the sequel rights to several movies and the Dimension Films label. They also continued their relationships with filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, and Kevin Smith. However, the first few years of the Weinstein Company were filled with misses. One of the few early hits it had was with the low-budget animated film Hoodwinked, a cheap acquisition that Weinstein hoped could compete with Disney. Hoodwinked pulled in decent numbers, although it also led to Harvey Weinstein thinking he knew how to produce animated films, which, as Dougal, Escape from Planet Earth, and even Hoodwinked 2 later proved, was not actually the case. The Weinstein Company did score its first Oscar nominees, with Best Actress nominations for Mrs. Henderson Presents and Transamerica, though. Despite having continued success with the sequels Clerks 2 and Scary Movie 4, 2006 was a year filled with flops like School for Scoundrels, Alex Rider's Stormbreaker, and awards hopefuls Bobby, Factory Girl, and Miss Potter. In fact, the Weinstein Company did not receive a single Academy Award nomination that year. 2007 wasn't much better, with Rodriguez and Tarantino's experimental double-feature Grindhouse being a particular disappointment, enough that the movies were released separately overseas and on home video. Rob Zombie's Halloween remake was maybe the rare bright spot. The Weinstein Company's strategy seemed to consist of releasing a bunch of genre films throughout the year, and then their trademark dramas with awards aspirations during the holiday season. Weinstein's infamous penchant for constantly delaying and recutting films based on test screenings also continued, most notably with Fanboys. That comedy about Star Wars fans trying to steal an early print of The Phantom Menace was a film that saw the director replaced, scenes discarded, the director brought back, and then after several moved release dates was unceremoniously dumped in as few screens as possible. Another notable blunder for the Weinstein Company came about with Kevin Smith's Zack and Miri Make a Porno. Despite starring Seth Rogen during a period when his star was rising, Weinstein bungled the marketing, resulting in the film making a lot less than expected, and souring his relationship with Smith. They did score a Best Picture nomination for The Reader, although many felt that slot should have gone to The Dark Knight or WALL-E. A major hit for the studio came with Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds, which gave them exactly the boost they needed in a tepid 2009. The Weinstein Company's period in the 2010s can best be described as rocky. They tried with a fair share of horror films, family titles, and prestige independent dramas, but the flops far outweighed the hits. Probably the few bright spots came about because of the Oscars. The King's Speech was positioned as an inspirational crowd-pleaser, which helped it do well at the box office, and with winning Best Picture. Harvey Weinstein was known for the campaigning he lavished on movies with Oscar chances, and King's Speech was no exception, right down to an endorsement from Queen Elizabeth II. And then the following year, the Weinstein Company won Best Picture again with the silent film homage to the artist. Basically, the few Weinstein films that got any sort of attention were ones that were nominated for Best Picture, like Silver Linings Playbook, Django Unchained, Philomena, and The Imitation Game. Although there were exceptions to the rule. The Butler was a surprise late summer hit, and the recognition for Fruitvale Station helped jumpstart Ryan Coogler's directing career. The Weinstein Company also handled the American release of Paddington, and much to everyone's surprise and relief, they did not mess with or re-edit the movie to make it more appealing for that market. And guess what? Audiences in the United States loved it, and the film performed well. Around the mid-2010s was when the flops really started to pile up, though. Star vehicles like Bradley Cooper's Burnt, Michael Fassbender's Macbeth, Natalie Portman's Jane Got a Gun, and Matthew McConaughey's Gold all lost money. Even films like Carol and The Hateful Eight, while doing okay business, were not nearly as successful as one might expect from major awards players released by Weinstein. The last successes for the studio came from the Best Picture nominee Lion and the thriller Wind River. However, the studio's debt continued to pile up, even as the studio lost money. And yet, Harvey Weinstein still felt confident in himself. Him and his brother tried to buy Miramax multiple times ever since Disney put that former shingle up for sale, but with no luck. And shortly before the American release of the animated film Leap, Weinstein announced he would start a new animation division at his company, although this was not the first time he had made such a statement. And they continued to submit promising films to the Toronto International Film Festival, including The Upside and The Current War in 2017. I remember thinking even back then that the Weinstein Company was probably on its last legs. How long could it survive box office flops like Tulip Fever and Three Generations? And then a bombshell was dropped. The New York Times and The New Yorker published extensive investigative articles revealing Harvey Weinstein's history of sexual harassment and abuse. And I want to take a moment to show my support for the bravery of the women who came forward and told their stories. What he did over his several decades in the business was horrifying and shocking, made even worse by those who enabled him and then hid his crimes. The number of women he assaulted totals in the hundreds, and it's unfortunate this had to go on for so long. However, it's because of these courageous women that many more powerful people in the entertainment industry started being toppled as more stories were told. Without the Weinstein accusers speaking out, the likes of Kevin Spacey, Brett Ratner, Charlie Rose, and Leslie Moonves, among others, would still be in positions of power without feeling the repercussions of their actions. Following these revelations being made public, Harvey Weinstein was removed from his namesake company and he found himself in court, eventually being sentenced to 23 years in prison. Meanwhile, the Weinstein Company filed for bankruptcy, with its assets sold to the equity firm Lantern Capital Partners, which was renamed Lantern Entertainment. Harvey Weinstein was also removed as a producer on Disney's Artemis Fowl, a project he long held the rights to. When they went bankrupt, the company had a number of films in post-production. These would eventually be sold off to other distributors. One of these was The Upside, which went to STX Entertainment. The film actually premiered at TIFF a month before the exposés were published, but when it finally opened in general release in January 2019, it turned into a decent-sized hit. Meanwhile, the director of The Current War was able to get the film back, after he was forced by Weinstein to rush to edit to make the TIFF screening. That movie, about the conflict between Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse, did not receive much attention on its theatrical release, but I'm glad the director was able to complete his intended cut. Paddington 2, Mary Magdalene, and the horror film Polaroid also found new distributors, following the end of the Weinstein Company. The War of Grandpa found itself stuck on a shelf for 3 years as it looked for a new home. 101 Studios, which also released The Current War, picked it up, and released it in the middle of the current health crisis, and it's actually done okay considering the circumstances. Then there were the projects which were being set up by the Weinstein Company, but were still in the development stages. Lin-Manuel Miranda was able to buy back the film rights to his stage musical In the Heights, eventually producing the movie at Warner Brothers, and an adaptation of the $6 Million Man television series, set to star Mark Wahlberg, also went to WB. At the moment, Travis Knight is currently signed to direct. In the end, the Weinstein Company, despite its occasional Oscar success, was not a very well-run studio. Even before 2017, it was frequently on the verge of bankruptcy, and it had far more box office flops than profitable hits. The biggest fault, of course, lies with the very men whose names opened every movie. Harvey and Bob Weinstein bled money, while also being bullies and tormenting staffers, filmmakers, and worst of all, several of the women who entered their offices or hotel suites. Usually, I'm upset when a movie studio closes its doors, but in the case of the Weinstein Company, I think the world is a better place without these two in charge. So I'll close off by recommending you watch the film The Assistant, which gives an idea of what it might be like to work in such an environment. See you next time.